In the misguided, confusing, and potentially illogical words of Yogi Berra, it is deja vu all over again for tonight because we have a situation where we have a no-brainer top pitcher in a good matchup who is going to be the chalk of tonight. The problem is that guy has some weather concerns. We got to decide, do we go back to that well and risk a postponement like last night with Jacob deGrom, or do we ignore Zach Wheeler and look elsewhere? I don't know. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get set for today's slate of MLB DFS. This is the FanDuel Live Q&A right here on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter channels. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Here to take your questions on air for the next 25 minutes, 30 minutes, I should say, to get you set for today's slate of MLB DFS. As always, after me, Erin Dolan will swing by and talk about game number 2 of the NBA Finals, and also John Sheeran of FanDuel Sportsbook going to swing by and talk with her as well. So that should be a whole lot of fun. That is going to be up at 4:30 today, so make sure you stay tuned for that and get those betting questions ready for Aaron and John at 4:30. But for right now, let's talk some MLB DFS and start things off with Jackie on Twitch. Good afternoon to you and everyone else tuning in. Good afternoon to you, Jackie, as well. Hope that last night was kinder to you for your Dinger Tuesday than it was to me. DJ, Ryu or Garcia? So this is Hyun-Jin Ryu or Luis Garcia. To me, I think you kind of have to go Garcia. I'm not super into Garcia personally because the match is pretty tough with the Athletics. So I'm not actively seeking him out. The problem is I just can't go Ryu. The form for Ryu is really bad. The numbers on the sheet that I have are over his past 4 starts. He has a 12% strikeout rate, a 5.44 skill interactive ERA, and that's not necessarily good. And he's also facing the Orioles. The Orioles are actually pretty good against lefties. 107 WRC plus, decent amount of power, not a lot of strikeouts, easily the best hitting situation on the slate for today. So I actually would choose to stack against Ryu over using him as a pitcher. And that could be stupid, probably is stupid. I've made a lot of stupid plays before, so not a huge deviation there. That's fine for me. But I think that that's the better way to play things here is to stack against Ryu rather than use him as a pitcher. So if it's just those two choices, I would go with Luis Garcia for today. DJ is saying that the weather in Chicago is not going to play. He says the Cubs will not play. It's nasty here, but not postponed yet. I'm looking at dark sky weather, and this is the weather in Wrigleyville as of right now, and it looks like they're expecting the rain to go away. Preset probabilities are pretty low throughout the night. This is according to dark sky weather. I will say that this morning, Kevin Roth of RotoGrinders said that this was definitely a little bit concerning. It looks like he saw some storms coming earlier on. We will see if this winds up playing. What I would do is defer to Kevin. Again, he's the actual meteorologist. I am not. I would check out what he says in his update at around 5:30 or so. Kevin Roth, WX on Twitter, to get an idea of what he thinks for today. As of right now, I think we probably are good to go because dark sky weather sees things clearing out around Wrigleyville for today. So as of right now, I'm expecting that game to be good, but we shall see what he says later on. Again, trust him over me every single time. Kyle, do you like a value stack around 3K and under of the Dodgers for tonight? So both the Dodgers and the Marlins are doing a bullpen game for today, and both those bullpens are actually pretty good. Let's dig into Ross Detweiler here because he is the announced starter for today for the Marlins. And it will be Jake Reed, former Minnesota Twin, starting for the Dodgers for today. Detweiler, probably going to go about an inning. But so far this year, he's been pretty good. So they're throwing out a decent pitcher to start off the game. Overall, their bullpen this year, or their active roster bullpen, has a 3.20 ERA, 24% strikeout rate, good batted ball numbers. So I'm okay being lower on the Dodgers. I'm also okay being lower on the Marlins because the Dodgers bullpen is pretty good. Jake Reed, I don't think we have a huge sample on Jake Reed thus far. Pretty sure he just got called up pretty recently. But either way, the bullpen for the Dodgers, very good. Not one I want to stack against. So I'm pretty much okay ignoring that game for the most part, not getting super into either side there. Mateo, glad I didn't use DeGrom and cash with my Padres. Mateo, you should have warned us. Should have gotten me off there as well. Going back to the Padres, but I need at least 2 bats in my utility spot at the $2,700 salary point. Who do you like? Okay, so we're looking for a one-off here around $2,700. I'm guessing it's going to wind up being a Mariner or an Oriole because both those options are lower salaried. I think that they've got a decent amount of upside for today. Kevin Biggio, I believe, is 28, so we can't quite get to him. Let me check to make sure. Biggio is $2,800, so we can't get to him. If you can make that work, Mateo, I'd go there. Austin Hayes, pretty good option. Probably going to bat second, I would assume, for the Orioles for today. He has some power at a good spot in the order, puts the ball in the air, good weather like him. Jake Fraley, it has as projected to bat 8th. I disagree with that. He'll probably bat 5th or so if I had to guess. $2,700, has some power, has some speed. I like that for sure. So Fraley and Hayes are probably the first guys I'd be looking to there as being high upside batters in the $2,700 range and on stacks that I like as well. So those are probably the top 2 options I give you, Mateo. If you can't get to Biggio at $2,800, I would say Fraley and then Hayes are going to be the guys stand out most to me. Jackie, it was kinder to me, but not in a winning sense. Just didn't lose as much. Yeah, so that's better. Not losing as much as a victory sometimes. That's good. Julius over on Facebook, Harper or Yastrzemski? In general, it's going to be Bryce Harper facing Alec Mills. And we also have the weather situation there. And Mills, a guy who does get a lot of ground balls. The problem is I don't want to overthink it, and I don't want to ignore Bryce Harper when it's compared to Yastrzemski. So Yastrzemski is very good, but Bryce Harper is disgusting. So if I'm choosing straight up between those 2 guys, give me Bryce Harper there. Although I will say I am more inclined to stack the Giants than to stack the Phillies for today. Jackie, 3 down 20 when the Braves went down today, so they pulled this win out. I'll have a nice little win. Good. Like it. Let's go Braves. Get Jackie some money over there on Twitch. DJ, he likes Yaz, and Julius likes Yastrzemski as well. So maybe I'm on an island with Bryce Harper for today. Okay, Jackie, thoughts on the Red Sox lineup for today? They are not on the main slate, so I've not done a lot of research on that Red Sox game. Facing off with Andrew Heaney, and let's see here. The lineup looks like pretty similar to what I would expect versus a lefty. So I would say whatever your expectations were for the Red Sox, keep them equal because that is in line with what I was expecting. Michael, is your stack hierarchy still Toronto, Baltimore, and Seattle? As of right now, yes, because I haven't really seen a lot to really convince me to go elsewhere. I think the Giants are there. I think that they're not. I think that I'd put the Mariners firmly above them, but I think the Giants are at least in that same tier just because the downside with the Giants is always park factor. But if you look at for today, there's really only one good park on the slate from a hitting perspective, and that's out in Baltimore. So the downsides, the opportunity cost in stacking in San Francisco is lower than what it usually is. So that's what I'd say there, Michael. I would say the Giants are in that tier. So it's kind of a tier of 4 for today, with the 3 listed: Toronto, Baltimore, Seattle, and then the Giants being in there as well. Jackie, so I'm figuring out how to use my FanDuel points. If it's for the DFS side of things, you can go over here and scroll down to the enter with blank FanDuel points. That's based on the what's it called? Entry fee. The entry fee associated with the contest. You can enter with FanDuel points there. So hopefully that helps. Just scroll down and find that as opposed to paying with cash for that one. DJ, is Kikuchi worth a look at all against Domingo Germán? I think that Kikuchi is not totally out of play for today. The reason I couldn't quite get there is because the Yankees are pretty solid. They have a middling strikeout rate of 24% versus lefties, a middling WRC plus at 100. Kikuchi, the numbers I have here are over his past 4 starts. And Clinton actually asked about Kikuchi too. So this is pertinent for both of you on that one. I think that Kikuchi would probably be number 4 from a pitching perspective for me for today. It's Zach Wheeler number 1 by a wide margin. I'll go Alex Wood 2, Chris Paddock 3, but then if I were to pick a 4th pitcher, it would be Yusei Kikuchi. So if your process led you to Kikuchi, I'm okay with it, and I think that it does make sense. So Clinton and DJ, I am okay with Yusei Kikuchi for today personally. Let's talk to Jerry over on Facebook. Good day, Jim. How do you rate these? Colorado, Arizona, Dodgers, Miami. If you were to play any, and who is your favorite for today? I'm probably not going to stack any of them. The reasoning for not stacking the Rockies or the Diamondbacks is that they're both bad. And I have other bad teams and better matchups I can use. Antonio Senzatela has been getting a little bit better recently. This is over his past 8 starts with more four-seam fastballs. His skill interactive ERA is 3.97. He has a 17% strikeout rate, which for Senzatela is a lot higher than his baseline. A 25% fly ball rate allowed, and he's facing a bad team. So not super into Arizona. Also, the roof is closed at Chase Field for today. So that's going to lower expectations for both offenses. The Rockies, I think, are palatable facing Humberto Castellanos. I'm not sure what Castellanos is going to do because he has been working, like his one appearance was from the bullpen. So I guess it's a couple appearances, but like in AAA, his numbers weren't good. So I'd rather stack the Rockies there, Jerry, than the Diamondbacks. The reason I'm not super jazzed to stack the Rockies is that they are hideous outside of Coors Field. Like they're bad in general, but they're especially bad outside of Coors Field. And again, the roof is closed. So Rockies tough for me to get to, but I would prefer them over the Diamondbacks. The Dodgers and the Marlins, again, not super enthused there because of the bullpen situations. I think both those bullpens are pretty good, so the value in a bullpen game is lower than it would be otherwise. So to me, if I had to pick one, probably going Rockies, but none of those teams super high on my list for today. Let's talk to Emmanuel. I need a catcher or first base at $3,100 or less. Okay, let's go over here to FanDuel, pull up catcher/first base. Scroll down to $3,100. Okay, Elias Diaz, no. Christian Walker, meh. Cronenworth, facing a lefty, and Patrick Corbin. Posey's banged up. Actually, probably if he plays, it might wind up being Buster Posey. Didn't play yesterday, but it sounds like it's not an injury. They'll keep him out super long. Posey's been awesome this year, so I could get behind that potentially. Trying to see if there's anything else here that stands out from a lower salaried perspective. Ryan Mountcastle is $2,900. I actually do like him a pretty decent amount just because I like that stack for the Orioles. So I think that Mountcastle works. Luke Voigt is facing Kikuchi. If Torrance plays, he'd work as well. So I think that if we're looking for a catcher/first base at $3,100 or lower, I would say I would circle probably Mountcastle because I'm very likely to be stacking that team. But also the other one to consider for me would be Buster Posey if he's able to get back in there for today. Kyle, what pitcher are you going to if Wheeler's off the table? It's either Paddock or Wood. I'm leaning towards Wood right now just because Wood has been steadier over the larger sample. Better park factor for today too. Facing the Cardinals, not a super imposing team overall. Better against lefties for sure, so that does make it worse than it would be if Wood were a righty, but still not a super imposing matchup. So I think that Wood is going to be number one outside of Wheeler for me. Paddock too. Paddock got blasted when I used him against Arizona 2 starts ago, but it's been very good outside of that. So Wood number one, Paddock 2, and then Kikuchi would be a consideration for me as well as someone I would use there. Michael, okay, so the Toronto lineup is out, and we had Julius asking about the Blue Jays stack for today. Julius, I am on board. Let's go through this lineup now it's out. Thank you, Michael, for letting me know that one was out. Marcus Semien, Bichette, Guerrero, Springer. This is exactly what was expected. So this is good. This is actually what we want here for the Blue Jays. So let's go over here to FanDuel. We're going to plug in Zach Wheeler. And we're going to go to Biggio at second base, probably going to be the first guy I want to lock in just because he's like kind of the one guy who's not breaking the bank for you on this team. He's batting 7th. That's not super high, but I am okay with that just because I want access to this team. And even if it does come from the 7 hole, that's still better than we'll be looking for elsewhere. So we've got that. And let's check back at the lineup over here. Okay, so we have Teoscar batting 5th, Grichuk batting 6th. Numbers versus righties for this year. Grichuk is at a 185 ISO. That's actually pretty good. So I think that Grichuk will be the second guy we'll plug in here. Does mean we're using the 7 and 8 guys as like kind of the building blocks of the stack. Someone's at the door, apparently. No one's ever at the door. That's like the 3rd time I've heard the doorbell in like the 2 years of this house. Anyway, Biggio and Grichuk, I would say the 2 quasi salary savers here within this stack. And then you're looking at what you want to prioritize outside of that. Obviously, if you can get to Vlad Guerrero Jr., do it. You want to get there whenever you can. but let's assume that that's tougher. I would say Marcus Semien is the number 2 priority on this team. 257 ISO versus righties, 46% fly ball rate. He steals some bases. He's disgusting across the board. $4,200 is a lot, and it is higher than what Bo Bichette is at for today. He is $3,900, but I think that's worth it. $300 gap between the two. Puppy is very excited. There's someone at the door. But I would say that salary gap is not big enough given the upside gap between Semien and Bichette. So to me, I would say go Semien second among the studs after Vlad Guerrero Jr. Vlad's 46. Let's just see. 2275. Woof. Okay. So we're probably not going to make that work. You're probably choosing one of the studs here. I would say Teoscar at $3,400 definitely works too. So there you go that. George Springer hitting the ball pretty hard recently. So I think that all these guys work. Puppy is very distressed that there's someone at the door, but she'll be fine. She's good. So I would say honestly anyone, but if we're ranking out prioritizations on this team, I would say Biggio and Grichuk for the salary in a Wheeler lineup. If salary is no object, I would say Vlad 1, Semien 2, probably George Springer number 3. And then I would go with Bichette 4, Teoscar 5, or actually Grichuk 5, Teoscar 6, and then Biggio 7. His salary is no object there. Hopefully that helps to the Blue Jays for today. Jackie, currently at the doctor's office for my grandma's appointments. I might have to wait and watch the playback after the stream. So good luck, Jackie. Hope it goes well. Thank you for tuning in. DJ, is Houston or Oakland a better stack? Stack the Cardinals or Giants? Don't stack the Cardinals. I like Wood a decent amount, so don't go there. Would not stack the Astros. The A's, because they face Luis Garcia. Not really into the Astros against John Manaea. Pretty good pitcher. Obviously, they are tremendous versus lefties. So that does change things for sure, but I'm not really into either side of that game personally, just because the pitchers there are both pretty good. I would stack the Giants, though. The Giants are definitely the number 1 stack of those options listed and kind of the one team I'm looking for today. Let's talk to Patrick over on Facebook. Would you play Corbin playing in San Diego? Okay, so Patrick Corbin here facing the Padres. The numbers on Corbin over his past 4 starts with fewer 4-seam fastballs. 3.82 skill interactive ERA is not bad, but a lot of that's because his walk rate is so low at 3%. 21% strikeout rates, decent batted ball numbers. The Padres definitely better versus lefties and versus righties. So I wouldn't actively look to stack against Corbin. I think that we could see people potentially going to San Diego for today. I probably will not be one of those people just because I think that Corbin's been decent enough recently. Obviously the results are not great, but I also don't see enough here to feel great about using Corbin as a pitcher. So I don't think it's an off-the-wall consideration, given that he has gotten some strikeouts in this time, but he won't be on my list personally just because the strikeouts recently haven't been quite high enough. Let's go to DJ. Would you use Miles Straw as one of your home run challenge players? Absolutely not. I'm guessing this was a joke, so no. I would not use Miles Straw as one of my home run challenge players. I see Jerry is giving a grand slam call for the bonus over on FanDuel. Cody Bellinger and a possible, but I say he homers as well, Peralta. Okay, so he's on Cody Bellinger for today, and I'm assuming David Peralta most likely for Arizona. So let's go through some home run picks for today. The home run picks from the podcast this morning were George Springer and Jake Fraley. George Springer was a boring one because it's a match with Matt Harvey, so everyone's going to want to go there. It's not contrarian, it's not out there or anything. I just think it's a logical pick for today. And I felt like going Vlad was too boring, so I didn't pick Vlad as my home run call. But George Springer is my boring home run call, facing Matt Harvey, hitting the ball pretty well recently. So we'll go George Springer for one. Jake Fraley is because I think he's really good, but also because Domingo Germán has been slipping up here a bit recently. This is over his past 6 starts with more 4-seam fastballs. His 4-seamer is not ideal. It's not a great pitch for him, but he's using it more, potentially because of the sticky stuff discussion, can't get a grip on his off-speed stuff, whatever it may be. Either way, the numbers of past 6 starts for Germán, not ideal. 4.94 skill interactive ERA, a lot of fly balls, a lot of hard contact. So for funsies, I like Jake Fraley for tonight. If we're looking home run challenge, you don't have to be as weird with your picks. So let's pull up the I don't really want to use a giant, I guess, for a home run challenge type thing. I would say that like a Ryan Mountcastle or a Trey Mancini type might make a lot of sense. Mancini specifically trying to ramp up for that home run derby that he's got. So I think that if you want to use someone in the home run challenge who's a bit different, but also makes a lot of sense, Trey Mancini is probably that guy. So we'll go Springer, Mancini, and we'll keep Jake Fraley in there for funsies because, again, I think he's fun. So we'll go with those guys for some home run calls for today. DJ, I know how bad the Cubs are lately, being a Cub fan. Is Travis Jankowski worth a look since he is in the lineup? Okay, so the Cubs are facing Zach Wheeler. No, I would not. Zach Wheeler is tremendous. Good across the board, 2.73 skill interactive ERA, does not let up hard contact. I would not use any Cubs for today. Michael, would you prioritize lefties on San Francisco for tonight? Okay, so let's sometimes the lineup is out crazy early. Just refresh really quick to make sure it's not. Okay, so it's not. But let's go through here. Check out the projected lineup here for the Giants and see what we should be cooking with for this one. Oh, sorry, DJ. So you were talking about Jankowski for the Phillies. My bad. I totally glossed over that. But yeah, facing Alec Mills, guy who does suppress hard contact. So I probably would not be there necessarily just because, like, if you're looking at him for a one-off, Jankowski probably not going to have the best upside because Mills does such a good job suppressing hard contact. So I wouldn't be looking at the Phillies for one-offs outside of like Harper if you had the salary, but they're probably better studs to get to. So it's not totally off the wall, but, you know, I wouldn't be getting there myself. Okay, let's go back to the lefties here for San Francisco. All these guys have super low salaries, so that's pretty fun. The one thing we have to consider here with the Giants is we have to make sure it's going to be a guy who is going to stay in there for the entire game, not get taken out due to a pinch hitter and stuff like that, because they are very willing to take guys out for those reasons. Let's pull up the Giants numbers versus righties this year, and they've obviously been tremendous across the board. So let's see who we should prioritize for today out there against Johan Oviedo. So we got Yastrzemski, if we're doing the projected lineup, Yastrzemski, Dickerson, Posey, Wade batting sixth most likely. Okay. And then we'll see if Posey does wind up being in there. Okay. Brandon Crawford, Yastrzemski, those are great numbers. No Belt, obviously. Duggar's at 221. So because the salaries are all pretty low, I would say you should have the flexibility to kind of use whoever you want here. Dickerson, let's check out. Dickerson sometimes does leave for pinch hitters. It's not been as bad with all the injuries piling up. So I'm not super concerned about that, but it's at least worth noting that's a consideration for today. Okay, let's go with Crawford 1 because he feels shortstop. If I don't have utility selected, we'll go Crawford 1. Let's go with Yastrzemski 2. Number 3. I would like to get to Buster Posey. I know he's not a lefty, as you had mentioned, but I do think that if he's in there, if he plays, which is a concern or a question mark right now, I would say he'd be number 3 for me, despite the fact he's not a lefty. After that, we're probably looking at between, I guess, Wade, based on where he tends to bat, versus Dickerson. And Wade does have some speed, has shown some power this year. So if we do get Wade batting 6th, I actually might put him above Dickerson. Dickerson's $2,500 though, so I guess it depends. I would say either guy works. So I would say that's the way I would check out that. But I think this is a solid one right here. Checking out Wade, a tiny bit above Dickerson, but we'll see where things break from a salary perspective. You need the savings. Like if you need to jump down $400 to go from Wade down to Dickerson, do it. That is totally okay. Very much on board with that. So I would say potentially just 1, 2, 3, 4. If we get Posey in there for today for the Giants, kind of boring, but Wade is also a consideration there to see if he can, differentiate a bit from this stack. Okay, let's talk to Robert over on Facebook. Hoskins is very high. Yeah, he had a 40-point game yesterday, I think. Didn't matter because it was in my DeGrom lineup, so that went to waste. But yeah, Rhys Hoskins has shown a lot of power this year versus righties. I know the plate discipline numbers have been, I guess the word I would use is frustrating for Rhys Hoskins this year, but the power has been there all year long. 230 ISO for the year for Hoskins. Strikeout rate of 27%. That's acceptable for sure. So it's just because Alec Mills does such a good job of keeping batters on the ground. This is over it's only a 4-start sample since he, let's see here, since he rejoined the rotation. So this is his 4 starts since rejoining the rotation. 17% fly ball rate allowed. That is a very low number. So that's why I'm not like super into the Phillies for today. There's also the weather to consider, not just the fact that there is some rain in the forecast, but also because the wind was supposed to be blowing in. It is still blowing in at 12 miles per hour as of right now. It's 71 degrees. That's a lot lower than it was previously. So that's why I'm not super jazzed, but either side of that game, if it does play. But you're right. Rhys Hoskins hitting the ball very well right now. DePrince, when looking at bats, what are the best stats to look for? Good question. Let's take, so we've not talked about the Orioles yet. Let's use them as an example here. So we haven't really gone too much through them yet. We'll pull up the Orioles numbers and look at lefties. And I think the reason that I want to look at lefties here as an example is because we are dealing with small samples. And that's always going to be the case when we're looking at like platoon numbers. We're looking at small samples. So we see here with the Orioles looking at, 80 or so plate appearances versus lefties. That's not big enough for WRC plus to stabilize. So DePrince, if you're looking at just one stat, I would not look at WRC plus. And honestly, I would actively ignore WRC plus just because there are so many misleading factors that can go into it over such a small sample. So ignore WRC plus. It's on the sheet, but I would ignore it. The thing I want to look at in a small sample depends on the size. If it's a sample of this size, like 80 or so plate appearances, I will look at ISO because isolated slugging takes, I think, like 60 to 70 plate appearances to stabilize. We are mostly there. So we can say with a healthy amount of confidence that even though Cedric Mullins is a lefty, he hits lefties really well. 210 ISO so far this year for him versus lefties, 36% fly ball rate. That's tremendous. And obviously he can do a lot of damage once he hits the ball too. So Mullins, great. Mancini, great. Mountcastle, great. Galvis is on the IL, so we can't use him. Austin Hayes, really high ISO versus lefties. So that's what I look to first is ISO in this sample. If it's a smaller sample and you have to make a determination on, okay, is this guy someone who can realistically flash upside and be a tremendous option? I would say look at strikeout rate. If you're looking at a small sample, strikeout rate stabilizes a bit more quickly than ISO. So look at strikeout rate, look at walk rate, not because you want walks, but because you want guys who are seeing the ball well and doing stuff. So that's not just for like platoon splits, but also if a guy just came off the injured list, I want to check out his strikeout rate, his walk rate to make sure he's seeing the ball well, stuff like that, but then also look at his batted ball data. So for me, when I'm trying to select batters at this point in the year, we've had enough time for isolated slugging to stabilize. So that's going to be one of the first stats I turn to. Try to maximize ISO. In general, you want to minimize strikeouts, but for me, I tend to target lower strikeout pitchers, so it's not as much of a concern for the individual batters as it would be for a stack. So I would say check out the ISO, check out the strikeout rate, and go from there. And especially in the small samples we tend to deal with, I would actively be ignoring results-based stats like WRC plus, like those all-encompassing results-based stats, because they do take a pretty long time to stabilize. Hopefully that is a helpful question or helpful answer for you to Prince as you try to fill out your lineups for today. That is all the time that we have here for today on the MLB DFS side of things. But as always, once again for today, we've got more coming up for you. Erin Dolan's going to swing by and talk about Game 2 of the NBA Finals coming up tomorrow, which should be a fun one. We saw the Suns pick up a 1-0 lead last night. And as Erin predicted on the show, Giannis Antetokounmpo did play in that game. So I want to bring on Erin now and talk to her about game number 1. Erin, how did Giannis look in that first game? Like, what are you thinking for him going forward based on what you saw last night?
I mean, I think based on going forward, he obviously played pretty well in that first game. I expected that he was going to play. I didn't think he was going to look as great as he did, especially in that first 2 quarters. So I expect for game 2, he'll be fully healthy and fine. And honestly, they need to get a win in game 2.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And you're also going to have John Sheeran on, FanDuel Sportsbook on today. So
yes,
a lot of fun stuff here. This is awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Erin, good luck.
We'll see you,
Tell John that I say hi and have fun.
All right. Thank you, Jim. All right, what's up, guys? Happy Wednesday. I feel like with the holiday, it kind of throws you off a day, but we are going to bring on John Sheeran, Director of Trading, at some point in this show, kind of talk all things that happened in Game 1 and talk about how the lines have currently shifted as we look at the NBA futures market, as we look at the finals MVP market as well. So we'll have him on in just a bit, but quickly just wanted to wrap up about what happened in Game 1. Obviously, Giannis did play in that game. Suns covered. The game went over as well. I know that opening line, we talked about this yesterday, 217.5 moved up to 219.5 when it closed. And as for the Suns, they were laying 5.5 points when they closed. So we're going to bring on John Sheeran, Director of Trading, again to talk all things about these shifts. I know a lot of you guys will be asking questions, and you're more than welcome to ask questions directed towards me or John specifically. But let's bring him on right now so we can get him in here in this chat. Hi, John.
Hi, Erin. How's it going?
Good. How are you? Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Happy to be on.
Yeah, happy to have you. So obviously for Game 2, we already have the Phoenix Suns. They opened laying 5.5, and the opening number was the same exact thing for Game 1. But when we had Game 1 and that line opened, we knew that the Suns had more rest. They had that home court advantage. And also the status of Giannis was doubtful at the time. So why do you believe that the Suns are not favored by more in Game 2 at home after the outcome of Game 1?
Yeah, like you say, obviously Giannis was a big doubt for the game, and the spread at the same number kind of just reflects how much the Bucks probably need to improve their performance levels. And we all know about things like the zigzag theory and how the more you need a result, normally the better it leads to your performance. And I think that's a perfect case here where you don't necessarily see a movement in the line that reflects what we saw in Game 1, more what the Bucks probably need in Game 2. And it's that idea of like one iteration of a game. What do we really learn from it? And I think over the grand sample, we expect improvements both from Giannis individually, but also from the Milwaukee Bucks entirely as a unit.
Yeah, so let's switch it over to the total. So for Game 2, it opened 221.5. It's bet down to 220 right now. In Game 1, that line opened at 217.5, continued to move up, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show. Do you believe that this was set 4 points higher just because all 3 games that these teams have played against each other, including the regular season, have gone over the total?
I just think it's obviously much more, there's much more pressure on every possession, particularly when we get to the meaningful end of the game. Towards the end of it, obviously it didn't happen last night given the blowout, but normally if it's a close game, the possessions are longer, it cuts down from that perspective, and they mean more as well, frankly, in the finals. So, it's not unusual to see some sort of compression with the total overall, and I think that's what we're seeing here, despite the game going 223 points last night.
Interesting. So let's talk about the finals MVP market as well. So CP3 has now moved from plus 155 to minus 145 after that Game 1 win. Devin Booker moves back from plus 250 to plus 550. Do you think that the odds have shifted in favor of Chris Paul solely on the fact that he had that 32-point performance yesterday? He was obviously great for the team. Is this semi an overreaction to a Game 1 performance, or will we see Chris Paul continue to lengthen if the Suns win Game 2?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. From our perspective, he was probably too short ahead of Game 1. A lot of it was driven by the narrative going into the game. Obviously, the redemption for Chris Paul and 16 years in the league and getting to his first finals. So, I think there was that story about him. And then obviously we had the 40-point performance in the Western Conference Finals as well from him. So, yeah, we were a little surprised to see the gap we saw between Booker and Chris Paul, but I think the narrative on top of the performance from Chris Paul last night is enough to drive the odds to where we see them right now, where Chris Paul's, a pretty odds-on prohibitive favorite. And, it's going to take a pretty special performance from Devin Booker if the Phoenix Suns go on and win, particularly in what might be a bit of a short series. If we see a repetition of what we saw last night, then obviously, Devin Booker is even more ground to make up on Chris Paul than if we were to get 7 games.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are really riding off hoping to see Chris Paul really build on his legacy and get a ring finally. Let's also talk about the NBA Finals series price. So the Suns are favored. They moved from minus 200 before Game 1 to minus 300 currently on the FanDuel Sportsbooks. But the Bucks also moved back to plus 240. For those tuning in, how much do these odds shift per game?
Yeah, I mean, obviously quite a lot. As you said, we've gone from minus 200 to minus 300 on Phoenix, and not alone was it a pretty decisive win from start to finish, but I think for the matchups as well, it looks pretty ominous for Milwaukee. Yes, Giannis was far more effective than we thought he might be. I didn't expect to see him for any of the series finals. I know you had a view that we would see him, so maybe we should get you to help us out a little bit more often, Erin. But
you setting the lines.
I was pretty surprised to see him, and very surprised to see how effective he was and how much like himself he looked. But it does look a little bit ominous in terms of the matchup. And I think the guard play that we particularly saw from Payne and Johnson on top of Booker and Paul, as well as a pretty dominant performance from Ayton on the boards, it looks pretty ominous for Milwaukee moving forward.
Yeah, Ayton was absolutely incredible last night. I'm glad I took his over for his rebounds props. But there's obviously some markets that are available, like player series point average, for example. Some of those became available, even more players in the last 24 hours. Should bettors expect to see more markets available in the upcoming days in terms of this NBA Finals?
Yeah, I mean, look, we continue to try and make sure that customers have the best opportunity to bet on whatever element of the game, whatever element of the series that they want to bet on. And like you say, that involves more specific player averages and player markets over the entire series rather than each individual game. So the team continue to work as hard as they can to produce, more engaging content for bettors, and letting the bettor choose what they want to bet on, like I said, is the kind of key element for us. So we'll continue to work hard and try and embellish the product as best we can.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying already watching this NBA Finals. Some great markets available, again, on the FanDuel Sportsbook. And while we have you here, John, I might as well just ask you, Game 5 tonight in NHL. Canadiens were able to pull off the overtime win last game, obviously able to force a Game 5. But the Lightning, heavy favorites, they can win the Stanley Cup back-to-back seasons. Now, are you seeing any sharp money at all come in on the Canadiens, or is the entire world on the Tampa Bay Lightning? Because looking at the money right now, I'm pulling it up right now on OddsFire. I believe it was 98% of the money was on Tampa Bay Lightning money line.
Yeah, I mean, that looks pretty much exactly what I'm seeing in the field book here. And yeah, I think we've been lucky. The guys did a great job here in terms of concentrating on Tampa Bay, and we were quite sweet on them even when the Avalanche was still in the series. And the Stanley Cup market was one that we were pretty aggressive on at the Avalanche, and we wanted to try and keep bettors away from betting Tampa Bay with us. And thankfully that's transpired. Like you say right now, heavily dominant on Tampa Bay. And I think we all expect the Stanley Cup to be closed out tonight. And I expect to see a pretty dominant performance from the Lightning.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's going to be closed out tonight. I'm thinking the Tampa Bay Lightning absolutely take it. But John, thank you so much for joining us here on this Q&A. I'm sure all of our viewers and listeners, and if you're watching, absolutely enjoyed this, got some great insight for you. And I'm sure we will be having you back on next week to talk even more about the NBA Finals.
Appreciate it, Erin. Have a good day.
Yes, thanks for coming on. All right, guys, let's answer some questions. It's Jackie Moon saying, hello, I'm back. CP3 is getting the MVP if he stays healthy and they win. As John Sheeran said, a lot of this is around the narrative, which is why I wanted to ask him specifically if it was an overreaction to his performance in Game 1. Let's say he went out there and he only scored 10 points, for example, and Devin Booker had 50 points. I'm sure the line would have semi-moved in favor of Booker and not back, and maybe Chris Paul would have just moved up just a tad. But I like that. I have Chris Paul winning MVP. I said this morning when I went on More Ways to Win, which is a great show that is streaming for FanDuel, so you should definitely be tuning into that. They had some great insight today. Lisa Kearney was leading that. But all around, I have CP3 winning it all. After the game yesterday, I know I tweeted out, I was like, I'm fading the public. I'm taking the under, and I'm also taking Bucks plus 5.5. Terrible tweet. We'll never do that again. We'll never absolutely fade the public again. Learned my lesson there, even though most of the times it does work out. I wasn't surprised Giannis played. We talked about this yesterday. I was expecting him to play in this game. I knew that he wasn't practicing with the team, so I kind of felt that maybe the Bucks were pulling a little bit of, I don't know the word, trying to fool us just a tad, us bettors, into thinking that he wasn't going to play in that game. But they looked great in the first half. I thought it was actually going pretty well. And then we can kind of get into some of the, why don't we pull it up? Here we go. We'll get into some of the more stats. As the other thing that I wanted to mention, since we talked about it yesterday, for the Suns, they did cover that first half spread. That was the only thing that went well for me yesterday, and Ayton over rebounds. Other than that, I didn't do too hot yesterday. But you always rebound here in betting. We always rebound. And you guys remember, you can drop any questions in. Sorry, I kind of look like I get distracted because I'm reading and trying to see if any of these questions flood in. Mr. Jackie Moon saying, I think even if Booker averages 40, it's going to be CP3, as you mentioned. And as John mentioned, as I mentioned, as you just mentioned, it does seem like that would be the case. Devin Booker also much more young, and Chris Paul has been in the league forever, one of the greatest point guards of all time. He's regarded as, even without having a ring. So if he wins, or if the Suns win, I do think, obviously, it seems very deserving for him. But looking at the stats from yesterday, it doesn't seem too bad. The Milwaukee Bucks shooting 46% from the field goal range, three-pointers 44%, 16 to 36, which is pretty good for them. So I feel like this wasn't an absolutely terrible game. Nobody played, terribly. Chris Middleton took his under in points, thinking he was going to hit under 26.5. He has 29. Giannis, 20 points, 17 rebounds. I mean, he seriously looked like he was not injured whatsoever. Like, that extended knee absolutely did not bother him whatsoever, which is a good thing. I'm glad, because now we're going to have a really good series, and it's not going to be Suns in 4, even though it technically could still be that. I don't see that happening. The Bucks, out of some respect for themselves, have to win at least one game. I said Suns in 6. We can kind of talk about that in a little bit, but it's Mr. Jackie Moon saying I had 8 and 20 plus points and 16 plus rebounds for like 3 parlays, but threw them in with some losing legs. Doesn't that stink when one player in one part of your parlay, you're really thinking it's like, out of all the legs, 16 plus rebounds? Gosh, yeah, he killed it yesterday. Yeah, look at all the, Booker, 27, Paul, 32, 8 and 22 points, Mikal Bridges, 14, 8 and 19 rebounds. Would you look at that? His rebounds props definitely going to be high for the next game. But exciting things. I mean, I think the biggest takeaway from this game is it seems like the Bucks actually technically played well. So I think the Suns are going to be able to close it out sooner rather than later. I feel like the Bucks went into a lot of game 6s, game 7s, able to come back. Obviously, we knew that against the Brooklyn Nets when they were up 2 games. So there's obviously the potential that happens. But I don't know. I'm not feeling great about the Milwaukee Bucks winning a ring, unfortunately. Why don't we get into some of the odds right now, FanDuel Sportsbook. As we talked about, Suns laying 5.5, basically the same exact line as game 1, which was interesting. We asked John about that, as well as why this is that way, because we know that Giannis is going to play in this game. And also why it isn't even longer, considering that the Suns had won by so many points last game. As for the total, obviously it soared over 219.5 yesterday, so it's not surprising that it's set a little bit higher. I also think that when you're betting into a series, regardless, the first game is the hardest games, because you don't know how these teams actually stack up against each other. Yes, they played against each other in the regular season, but the stakes were not the NBA Finals, getting a championship ring type of pressure. So I think after game 1, you kind of have a better read on how things are going to go between these two teams. Obviously, things are going to switch so that the teams can prepare and continue to win. The Suns will do what they can again, and the Bucks are going to try to adjust their game plan, I'm sure. We can click into this market in a little bit, but we'll just go through some of these top tabs. Obviously, as you can see, the FanDuel Sportsbook looks a little different than it did yesterday. We had a little update over the night, so I hope you guys like this, but it does look a little bit different today. All right, NBA Finals championship. There we go. Suns minus 300. You're not going to lay that number at this point. Bucks plus 240. If you think the Bucks are going to come back and win, plus 240, not a bad price. Also, as we talked about yesterday, you can bet on the NBA Finals series betting, the series spread. So this shifted a lot. It's still the same, minus 1.5. But yesterday, the Suns minus 1.5 was at plus money, and the Bucks plus 1.5 was, I believe it was minus 140 something, but now plus money. So what I also mentioned yesterday is if you don't have a good read on this and you want to kind of wait out the games, betting on 4 games, 5 games, 6 games, 7 games, this is where you still see some type of value. And it's interesting to see 7 games plus 195. I guess you're thinking this is really going to go the distance. I personally do. I said Suns in 6. I think the Bucks, like I mentioned, they have to get a win at least. I know a lot of people were originally saying 5 games, but maybe when the Milwaukee Bucks go home, they'll play a little bit better. I always feel like they play better at home. All right, player futures. As we talked about the narrative, Chris Paul, look, continue. This just moved down from minus 155, I assume. Giannis sticking around the same spot, 500. Booker moving back, jumping past Giannis, plus 550. Chris Middleton moving down, 8 and 12 to 1. Drew Holiday, 45 to 1. Mikal Bridges, Brook Lopez, Jay Crowder. I would not be betting into any of these. I wouldn't even bet on Ayton or Drew Holiday. Chris Middleton, I mean, this seems to be, that came down overnight. I could see out of all these players, Middleton, if the Bucks were to win and he was able to put up a ton of points, but I still think they would give it to Giannis. with the narrative. And same thing with Chris Paul. It seems like it's going to be either one of these two. But I would wait for the Chris Paul number because I think if, let's say, they win the next game, it's going to move out. If the Bucks win game 3, it might move back down. We might get it minus 120 or something like that. So I think I would wait in terms of this market. Mr. Jackie Moon, I feel like he's always coming on here. Has to be 6 or 7. If I'm guessing, I currently have a bet for Suns in 7, I think. What do you mean you think? I feel like you got to know what your bets are. Benjamin Cruz, I told you all to bet the over on Brook Lopez with the money sign. Good for you. And yeah, you could bet on the Brook Lopez for the series, what he's going to average. And all those players are actually, more players, I should say, are starting to become available. As you could see, series top point scorer, we talked about this yesterday. And then for the series most total assists, series most total rebounds, kind of get into those. Here's what I was talking about yesterday, this point average. Now you have Chris Paul. You have Ayton. I feel like we should have an Ayton series rebound average because after last night, we should have that. Chris Middleton series. Here we go. Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez. So yesterday, this Brook Lopez was 14.5. This is now at 13.5, what he's going to average. But it's interesting that we have some of these markets. And the other thing, like I mentioned yesterday, definitely be digging on the FanDuel Sportsbook during this time because you'll find, like, for example, some of these players weren't available yesterday. These just popped up in the last 5 hours because this morning I was looking and they weren't available. So always be checking on here. I know it looks a little bit different, but you'll adjust your eyes just fine. Let's get into the game, see if they have any player props available. All right, so we have the normal things. Some of them are already up. Player points just becoming available. Oh, look at this. This looks totally different than last time. You don't have to click into the tab. FanDuel making this a lot easier for us. Making it a lot easier when I'm talking about it as well. All right, Giannis, 26.5, Middleton, 25.5. This is interesting because last game it was 26.5. I said take the under. I'm wondering why it's 25.5 when he had 29 points for the last game. Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez, let's see, Devin Booker, 28, Chris Paul, 22.5. I feel like Chris Paul, every time that he has a standout game, I'm saying to take something under for him. Then he has a standout game. And then they set it at 22.5 when I feel like that should be higher. And Devin Booker, I feel like should come down a tad from 28.5. But maybe he'll go off in game 2. Maybe he was giving CP3 just a little time to take the ball there. Benjamin Cruz saying the value on Booker for MVP is great. I absolutely agree with you. I think out of the entire board, he does have the best value right now. Again, it just comes down to the narrative of, who plays better. I mean, if Booker plays the next couple of games 10 times better than Chris Paul, if he averages 45 points, 50 points, has one of those crazy games that he can have, and that we know he can have, it is really good value. Props to FanDuel for the update. Yes, props to FanDuel. This is actually so aesthetically pleasing now. Not that it wasn't before, but you'd have to click into every single person. I know sometimes on the chat, I would be like searching things through Command F, which is a great thing to do if you're ever trying to cheat on tests. I used to do that. You can quickly look something up, Command F, and you'll find it really quickly. All right, let's continue looking down. Let's see, all these are becoming available right now. I wish I could get into kind of all my picks for tomorrow, but I haven't gone through specifically each entire market because, again, the game is tomorrow night, so things are going to change up a little bit, kind of find out more things. We can see, for example, like player points match bet A, Giannis is available in all these markets, so we know he's going to play. It's not going to be a question of he was doubtful, then he was questionable, then it was a game time decision, then obviously he played. And I feel like the line started to shift after the videos started coming out of Giannis on the court, dribbling and kind of warming up. I feel like that's when people really knew he was probably going to play. I'm interested to see what rebounds is going to be for Ayton. 12.5. So yesterday was 11.5. Took the over there, worked out. He had 19 rebounds, of course, yesterday. So specifically wanted to see him. Giannis also, considering he had, I believe, over 17 rebounds. There we go. Crazy, crazy, crazy. So yeah, all the rebounds. Oh, we can actually do match bet now for rebounds. Maybe we could do that before and I just skipped over it because there were so many little tabs. And now we can actually see what's going on. It's Mr. Jackie Moon saying, I still have never used my laptop or FanDuel, just mobile. I'm the same way. I always use the mobile app. As you can see, I'm not even logged in on my computer. I feel like if you are live betting, absolutely use your computer. I feel like it's way faster. I know a lot of times in the NFL season, I feel like my friends sit around with their laptops, not to sound very, I don't want to say degenerate, but we would sit around with laptops and live bet. And that was kind of the way we did it instead of doing it on our phones. You can, click things in a lot quicker than you can on your phone, I feel. All right, so we have all those player combos, first half, second half. Let's see what the first half spread is. I was probably in the popular still, hopefully. How do I move over? Sorry, guys. I'm adjusting just as you guys are. Oh, here we go. Okay. Why do we not have that here? Probably under half, Erin. Let's get our head out of the sand. Here we are. All right, Suns minus 2.5. As we talked about yesterday, they've been hitting this a ton of time, especially when they're playing at home. I gave off a pretty crazy stat yesterday. Let me find that for you because this stat is actually very compelling to want to take the first half at all times. Okay, Suns are 27-13 against the spread in the first half as home favorites. It's pretty much convinced me that I'm going to take Suns minus 2.5. Don't know about you, but that's how I'm feeling there. Why don't you guys drop some more questions below and we'll talk about some more things. The other thing I wanted to mention, obviously, is we do have Game 5 tonight. As you can see, Tampa Bay Lightning heavy favorites minus 255. Looking at the money, which is absolutely insane for this game. I mean, 98% of the money, 92% of the bets are on the Tampa Bay Lightning to win. I'm assuming people are throwing this in a parlay because you're not going to take it minus 255. I don't really know anybody that takes the puck line either. So over seems to be the play here from what people are looking like. 76% of the money, 62% of the bets, a total at 5.5 right now. Personally, I'm not going to be betting on this game. Wish the Flyers weren't as crappy as they were. And I was talking about the Flyers being in this right now, but here we are. Oh, don't want to be touching NFL. We are not in NFL season. Quickly just looking at this, we can already see more money coming in again. It kind of looks identical. Phoenix money line for them to cover, seeing more money come in on the over. So it seems to be the same kind of situation. And what's interesting is the line has actually been bet down 1.5, even though more money and bets are coming on the over. So I'm not sure how I will want to play that total for tomorrow, but we'll kind of see how things shake out. Mr. Jack Moon saying, I think the Lightning close it out in Game 5. I also think that. I think the entire world actually thinks that tonight. I'm pretty sure I saw a video of the mayor or somebody hoping that it was going to come back to a Game 5 so that they could obviously win at home, which is much cooler than winning on the road. If I could win, obviously I'd want to win at home your championship. You wouldn't want to be in Montreal celebrating. I mean, obviously you get back pretty quick, but still, it's not the same. Let's see. We'll also look quickly at some trends because I will not be on tomorrow. I will be on a Bleacher Report TNT show, the group chat. Friday, I'll be on my way to Miami to do a FanDuel event called Fantasy over the weekend. So I am honestly only trying to give you the trends currently that we can see and some of the numbers that we're seeing because, again, I'm not going to be on tomorrow. Milwaukee Bucks are 4-0 against the spread in their last 4 games following and against the spread loss. 6-1 in their last 7 games, playing on 1 day's rest. I don't really think that's a very important trend. I would kind of just disregard that. Some of these you can see, you can factor these in, but sometimes it feels like for example, Suns are 9-2 against the spread in their last 11 after scoring 100 points or more in their previous game. I don't know how much I'd really factor that in. Not huge. Then you could do the overs 5-0 and the Suns last 5 versus a team with a winning straight up record. Of course it is because they're playing against all winning teams because they're in the playoffs. So I'm just trying to make the point that sometimes when you read these trends and do your research, really try to figure out what you want to focus on and what's trends that you actually want to follow, because some of these can seem, even though they're obviously great trends, it just can be a little confusing. Over 5-1 the last 6 meetings in Phoenix. Over is 5-0 in the last 5 meetings between these teams head to head. So we'll see how that game 2 goes. It was great having John Sheeran on. Last thing I'll mention, it's Jackie Moon saying, yeah, I heard a lot of their family members couldn't go to Montreal for travel restrictions, so I'm sure they'll be extra motivated to close it out in front of their family. Yes, Travel restrictions, not fun. I feel like a lot of stuff's still going on related to COVID. So it's getting better. Everything's getting better, but at the same time, there's always going to be still those restrictions a little bit. Jackie Moon also saying, I've never really looked at these trends, but I might check them out in the future. I think, again, it kind of, when looking at them, it might scream something, but is it really a trend you want to follow? I know a lot of people kind of follow the day trends as well. Not too into the day trends. It's kind of cool when someone says, a team's 5-0 in the last, 5 Wednesday games, but I don't really know how helpful that is in terms of betting, to be honest. But anyways, guys, thank you for joining me today on this Q&A show. Thank you for your questions, everyone that answered. As always, we still have the same game parlays. This hit yesterday, $25 for $3,500. And as you can see, we still have an update to everything here. So go through the FanDuel Sportsbook, find some more markets. Oh, NBA boost. 60-plus total points scored in the first quarter of the NBA Finals Game 2. That just went up. See, you got to monitor these things or else you don't see it. All right, guys. Well, I will see you next Monday, hopefully, in terms of tuning into this Q&A. We'll be talking all things that happened, I'm sure, in Game 3, looking ahead to Game 4. I hope you have a great weekend. I was about to say holiday weekend, but that just happened. And I will see you guys next week.